In today's video, we are talking about how Canada can reduce reliance on America and gain economic independence. As you probably know that right now, not everything is okay. There have been tariffs from the President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump. There is a moratorium. They've been suspended in the interim. That leaves us in limbo. The industry doesn't know which way to go. What are tariffs? A tariff is an import tax paid by an importer in a particular country. In this context, the American importer, if America imposes tariffs on Canada, say 25% on automobile and probably 10% on steel and aluminum. The American importer will pay 25% to the federal government of the United States. Now, after the importer has paid that tariffs, there are roughly out three choices. One, he can pass it in total to the consumer. In this case, say 25% on automobile. That means a truck, which was initially going for $75,000, will automatically become $100,000. Or he can decide to share it with his customers, that he is not going to pass everything to the customer. In this case, say split it 12.5, 12.5. In this case, the customer will pay 12.5 and he takes 12.5. The price will partially increase for the customer, but not much, by 12.5, and he will also take a hit on his profit of 12.5. The third option, he can decide, say, no, I am not going to pass all the tariffs to my customers. I will take them. He will take 25% hit on his profit. His profit will go down by 25%. This is how tariffs go. How do they impact the exporting company? Let's ask. The exporting company will be impacted by that the import on the goods that have been passed tariffs. He can either, one, decide to outsource, to look for alternative exporters of that goods. Say he's getting lumber from Canada with 10%. He can look to Brazil. He can look to other countries with no tariffs. Or he can source them internally if they are available instead of getting them from Canada. Ultimately, the trade or the volume of the purchase of the importer will have to go down. This is how tariffs work against the exporting company. But they are not paid by countries, and they are not paid by the exporting companies in a foreign country. Because I heard an American politician saying that it's good for American people when foreign governments pay tariffs to American government. Foreign governments do not pay tariffs. That means this politician, who claims to be speaking for the American government, didn't even understand how tariffs work, but she was claiming to be speaking for the American government on tariffs. We are going to look into U.S.-Canada trade relations, historically, contemporary, and what can be done about them. We are going to look at the continental market interactions and its effect on access, the impact of tariffs on Canadian products, as I've just said, the Canada economic dependence on the U.S. market, and Canada-U.S. energy relations and sources export, and the challenge and opportunities in diversifying trade, including barriers. Thus, in this context, we are talking about how Canada can diversify trade to other foreign lands, at the same time trade within provinces, say Ontario trading with Manitoba or Alberta, or Quebec. And Canada-US, we are also going to talk about how Canada-US share the most complex and consequential trade relations and the volume of exports which cross borders within Canada and the US. That's what we are going to talk about. Let's start by free trade, which was signed between Canada and the US in 1989. That's almost 36 years ago. In 1989, Canada and US signed a free trade agreement. Canada negotiated a free trade agreement with them. This was done that Canada secures access to vast American markets amid concerns that the protectionist sentiment and the unpredictable U.S. policy could shut out Canadian goods and services out of the United States. And also, the trade agreement extended later on to include Mexico, and it was then called NAFTA. The consequences of NAFTA on many Canadians. This gave Canadian companies access to market and drive economic growth and job creation, and also even cultural integration. Canada economic dependency, a vulnerability to American policy shift, and a threat to national sovereignty. This is also some of the things we are going to discuss. The trade volume. Canada exports 80% of its exports. They go to United States of America. That means each province export all that is exported by each province export on its own to America. 80%. That means only 20% goes somewhere else. 80% of Canadian goods are destined for United States, and Canadians import 50% of American goods. Most of the Canadian exports are raw materials, natural resources. They go to America. And then in turn, Canada imports about 50% of its import, they come from America. They are like consumer goods, are mostly come from United States. These are consumer goods and industrial supplies. Industrial trends, let's look at industrial trends. The integrated supply chain of automobile products crossed the border multiple times. Back in 1960, Canada signed an auto pact. This was an agreement that Canada assembled cars destined for United States, and some of them will be sold in Canada, of course, destined for United States. And here is what is happening. The American companies like GM, and they have assembly plants built in Canada. So on a vehicle, certain components of the vehicle will be fitted in Canada, and the vehicles will be transported to United States plants where they'll be fitted certain components, and then returned back to Canada where they'll be fitted certain components, and returned back to United States where again they'll be fitted certain components, and returned back. This goes back and forth multiple times before the vehicles becomes a complete product. That have made the two economies twine, Right, as I said that the product which we're making these vehicles, they cross multiple times before they become a complete product. This makes the industry on both sides mutually dependent. Let's look at Canada resources exports. Canadian resources, we have potash in Saskatchewan. We have Alberta is an oil-rich province, and we have Quebec and Ontario that produces hydro. And all this list of goods, they are shipped to United States. 90% of Canadian energy exports go to the USA. And Canada and US energy relations are a stable source of revenue and employment for tens of thousands of Canadians. And Canadian trade diversification and interprovincial trade barriers. You would find that in Canada, it's easier for Canadian province like Alberta to ship its oil direct to United States or ship its other goods, say to Brazil or to Mexico, rather than for Alberta or Ontario or Manitoba to trade with one another. So why is it so? They're trading within a province, say Alberta oil products and Ontario manufacturing, they are provincial trade barriers, differing regulations, licensing regime. So the new Prime Minister, whom I describe as a very smart man, he has given an ultimatum to these provinces. As we want everything smoothened by Canada Day, which is coming up on the 1st of July. By the 1st of July, this province would have worked out everything so that they can trade within each other, because we can also export to other provinces. For those watching outside Canada, Canadian provinces are self-autonomous provinces. They have this quasi-independent status. The federal government only runs Canada as a country, but it has only four major functions: criminal law, foreign policy, defense, and immigration. Most of everything else is done at the provincial level. Provinces, they manufacture their own goods and sell them abroad. Like Ontario export hydro to America, it sells a lot of manufactured goods to United States. Alberta extract the oil and sell it to United States. There is barriers in the provinces trying to trade with each other. That has to be, according to the new Prime Minister, that has to be done as soon as possible. By Canada Day, everything should be in place. So challenges in the diversification. As Canada is facing threats from the Americans, it has to look for other alternative market to trade within provinces, to trade with other countries, to trade with, say, Mexico, South American countries, Southern Asian countries, India, all those countries, rather than to solely depend on America. To export 80% of its exports to America, that's a lot of exports to only one country. That in terms of trade dispute like what we currently have at our hands, that can bring down the Canadian economy. That can bring down the Canadian economy down to its knees. Canada can become a third world country overnight if there another crazy American president comes along. Efforts to diversify trade away from US has been hampered by logistical and political barriers. Right? Logistical, it is expensive to ship Canadian goods overseas. It is easier to just put them on a truck, drive across to the United States, which takes hours, and then boom, you have a trade. And other political barriers. Say we have countries like China, where there's a little bit of hostility or political differences or political animosity. And also we have our countries like Russia, which can be a very large consumer of Canadian goods, but there are political differences. And also other regions like the Middle East, and also in some of the African countries. There's overwhelming pull, overwhelming attraction of the American consumer market makes opening new markets abroad, even inside Canada, a little of a challenge. Okay, what we're saying here is the Americans, they're very large consumer market, and also it's easier to ship goods to America, and also it's easier. The Americans, they buy a lot, they produce a lot, they consume a lot, they buy a lot. The Americans, they produce a lot, but than in other countries. Building more integrated markets could make Canada exports stronger and more competitive globally. If Canada was to look for alternative markets, not only depend on America, it was to look for alternative markets, say in South Asia or within its own country, within its own provinces, it would make its export more competitive. What we mean here is Canada exports everything. It's giving goods to Americans at a bargain. Now other markets that also demanding their goods, they can now go to America and say, this is our price, take it or leave. You'll be surprised that since I've been here, you find that Canadians, companies, they cry when our currency appreciate, when our dollar becomes strong. They'll be like, oh, it's hurting us in the export markets, it's hurting our, they want our currency to become weak. As I said in the video, that when your currency become weak, you become competitive. But the caveat to that, when you are now importing, you import inflation into your own economy. So the Canadians, they actually cry when our currency appreciate. At one time it was at par with, oh, they were crying. The companies were crying, literally crying. This is why now, because it's like they are used to give their goods to the Americans as a bargain, says, this is our price, take it. The Americans, they actually give them the price. Oh yeah, we can accept that for this amount. Oh yeah, we can take your lamb for maybe $20 for one. I'm just giving a ridiculous hypothetical figure here. But this is what is happening because they don't have any more markets outside where else except just wanting to sell to the American. If they can open other markets, they will make their goods more competitive. Now, in closing, let's look at what needs to be done. How can Canada reduce reliance on America and gain economic independence? It is clear that our economy and societies and industry are shaped by this interlocking set of agreements and market forces and technological advancement. Fresh trade agreements have facilitated, has enabled decades of economic growth and deepened intercontinental integration. And yet they've exposed Canada to new vulnerability and choices. When the American market shift and when political realities, political policy shift, when Washington pivot, they make us more vulnerable. As I said, that if Americans were to put a plug on Canada and maybe take all their companies, withdraw from Canada, and maybe delist Canadian companies from their stock exchange, Canada could become a third world country overnight. How do we move forward now in this context, in terms of this reality we have at hand? One, we need to strengthen our internal market, interprovincial. As Mr. Carney has given the ultimatum that by Canada Day, by July the 1st, provinces, put your act together. We We want you to be able to smooth the regulation and put the historical animosities aside and start trading. You are just brothers and sisters. You learn to work together and live together. And so they have to remove interprovincial barriers, and Canadian companies, they also have to look for other alternative markets abroad. This is how we are going to reduce reliance on America and gain economic independence. We have to steer away from the Americans. Look for trading partners in South America. Look for trading partners in South Asia. Look for trading partners in EU countries. Those are hard choices, but they take time. There's no silver bullet to this. You can't fix it overnight. These things should have been done. However, you know that politicians, they always are afraid for their political survival, for their political life. They say, if I try to steer economy this way, in the interim, things might go down and I'll be blamed for it. And if we go to the polls, I will lose. Let me maintain the status quo, leave things as they are. This is what has led us into this quagmire. We need to pursue strategic diversification. At the same time as we are pursuing those new markets, we also need to negotiate a deal with the Americans, because we have this alluring, diversified, large consumer market of the United States of America. We need to be smoothing the relationship with them and sell them. In the short run, we need to negotiate a deal with the Americans, and so that they can put aside these tariffs. After the agreement has been reached, in the back of our mind, we should know that there can be a policy shift. We should not expose ourselves to the whims and caprices of the future American regime. We have to start looking for market abroad. In fact, I said before that have other markets will even make our exports strong. This is how we are going to reduce reliance on America and gain economic independence. One, we need to trade within ourselves, within our own 10 provinces and 3 territories. Second, we need to look for other alternative markets for our goods. And of course, we need to smoothen the relationship with the Americans, as they have an alluring, specified, large consumerism, that we should not lose sight that another regime which might not be that friendly to Canada might also come up along in the future. We thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel.